morning, everyone, and welcome to session 4 of Represent, our virtual event series centered around learning, support, and community. So we're almost at the end of our second week of our events, and it's absolutely flying by. So welcome back to everyone that has joined us either for the event earlier this week or last week. But for those of you that have missed the events we've had so far, don't worry, we will be sharing playback details with everybody in the next few weeks, so you'll be able to catch up on any of the sessions that you missed out on. But over the next 2 weeks of the series, what we're focused on is giving you a great insight into life here at NatWest Group and a chance to engage with some inspiring colleagues, which hopefully will help you make a standout application. You'll learn how to champion your potential as well as finding a place to belong in the process as well. So my name is Nikki and I work in our early careers marketing team, and I'm going to be facilitating today's event for you all. Our aim for today is that you'll leave this session feeling clear, capable, and motivated on how to stand out in a digital world. We want to give you some practical tips from some experts on the call today so that you feel confident about this new digital approach in the graduate recruitment space. So we're going to be hearing from two of our colleagues. So we're lucky enough to be joined by Martin and Iffy, who are going to share their advice and experience on how to communicate with impact and confidence remotely, whilst also remaining authentic, and also how to make the most of the digital resources at your disposal when making your application as well. You might also recognize Iffy from our promotional videos, so you'll already have seen that she's an absolute natural in front of the camera. So it'll be great to get her tips as well as Martin's today as well. So the session today is going to be run as an informative conversational style session, and you will get the chance at the end to ask your own questions too. So keep a note of those and you'll get the chance at the end to ask. But just to get us started and to warm us up a little bit, let's do a quick poll. So we're just going to launch that. So you can actually use Zoom to vote there. And the question is, who feels confident presenting themselves virtually? So let's see if we've got anybody that absolutely loves presenting virtually, is super confident, or if we've got sort of a mix of people that need a bit more practice and find it a bit more difficult. So pop your answers in there and then we'll have a look and see where we all land. Lovely, you can see all those votes coming in. Great. Okay, Gareth, you can probably share those results just now. So as you'll see, most people are sort of leaning towards needing more practice, which I think is what we would expect to see. And it's great that you've come along today to help you out, and hopefully you'll learn some top tips to help you with that practice. And for those of you that love it and find it really easy, much easier than in person, that's great. We'll hopefully add on to that for you as well. And do feel free, if you do love to present virtually, in the Q&A section to share some of your tips with us as well. If you want to raise your hand and let us know, because it's always good to share your tips with everybody else. So thank you for voting in the poll there. Before we move on to introducing our wonderful speakers for today, what I'm going to do is just set a bit of context for you and talk you through some of the virtual components of our application process, the ones that we know students find specifically quite daunting. So I'm not going to go into each stage in depth because we did cover this last week in our application session. So please do watch that back if you missed it when we do send the recordings out at the end of the series. But just so you know, our entire application process this year is going to be done virtually. So you start with an online form, which just asks your basic details about you and your education. You'll then do some online tests, including situational judgment test, a numerical and a verbal reasoning test. And then the next component from then on is a video interview. Now, we know that this is one area that students struggle with the most. So I'm going to deep dive into that a little bit more and give you some really good tips for preparing for that. So for this, what's going to happen is you'll be asked a series of questions relating to your motivation for applying, as well as examples of your behaviours and competencies. So this is a timed video interview, which can be a little bit stressful, and you won't see the questions beforehand. You'll have one chance to film your response as well, which is a little bit scary, but fear not, I'm going to share some of our top tips for nailing this part with you just now and making sure that you do have that confidence to absolutely nail the video interview. So the first tip is to use your digital network. So whether that be LinkedIn or an organization's social media channels, for example, here at NatWest Group, we use Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. and use that to reach out to grads or other people in the business and ask them questions about what it's like to work somewhere or in a particular business area. This is going to help you build your understanding of what we do and also your motivation for applying as well. As much as you need to be the right fit for us, we also need to be the right fit for you. So do use your digital network to do some of that research. Also research the competencies and skills that a company is looking for in its talent. So most of them will list this on their website. For example, we have 5 critical people capabilities, and we're going to use them to assess you across each stage of the process. We did run through these in our application workshop as well, so do listen back and have a look at those. Once you've got the sort of competencies or skills that an organization might be looking for, map out some examples that demonstrate the competencies that you've displayed. So, one of ours, for example, is critical thinker. So take that and think of an example of when you've demonstrated that. This means you'll have something to refer to, which will help you manage your time as well. And lastly, practice. So film yourself answering some basic interview questions so that you get the feel of what it's like to record yourself. You might feel a little bit silly doing it, but it really will warm you up and make you prepared for when you do come to do a video interview. So the next stage after the video interview is you could be invited to join our virtual assessment center. So this is a full day of activities, and you'll go through 3 different activities on the day. There'll be group work, there'll be a one-to-one customer or colleague meeting, and you'll also do a one-to-one interview with an assessor as well from within our business. They're going to ask you more questions about your motivations for joining, as well as some competency-based questions. So this is another area where we know people get a little bit anxious in the application process. So I'm going to share with you our tips on how to make sure you're communicating confidently and being yourself on camera for your interview as well. First and foremost, preparation is going to be key here. So if you're prepared, you're going to feel more confident and you can focus on being your authentic self and getting your points across, rather than feeling panicked to come up with a response on the spot. So prepare, do some of those example mappings that I mentioned before. The next thing is it's okay to take a minute, even if you're on camera. If you need to take a moment to think about the question, gather your thoughts, write it down, that's completely fine. And your assessor is going to understand. You won't be marked down or frowned upon for taking a minute to just gather your thoughts. So don't dive straight into the question. Do just take that minute to think if you need it. Have a practice interview with someone over Zoom. So rope in your friends, your parents, your neighbor, anyone to do a practice with you. And it might seem a bit strange to do, but it's going to get you used to the format and some of the sort of non-verbal cues that you might be able to use during your interview as well. The next one is smile. So this is one that a lot of people forget, especially when you're nervous or anxious, but try to smile. It's going to relax you. You're going to come across more natural to your assessor, and it's just a really nice way to sort of calm the nerves if you do just smile. And I think people do forget. So whether you even stick a post-it note on your screen that says smile or a little smiley face, whatever it is to remind you, and try and enjoy it as well. And then linked to that is just make sure you pay attention to your body language and your tone, as this can make a real impact when you're not face to face. And lastly, it's just to be intentional about your value add. So what can you bring to an organization? What did you personally do in a situation when you're giving examples? So they're just some top tips for you to keep in mind on some of those virtual aspects that we know students do feel anxious or worried about ahead of an assessment center or a video interview. But that's enough tips from me. What we're going to do is hear from our speakers now, who are going to share their own tips with us. So I'm absolutely delighted to welcome both Martin and Iffy to the session today. What I'll do is I'll get them both to introduce themselves and share in turn some of their valuable advice and experience on gaining confidence in the digital age. So we're going to start with Martin. So Martin, I'm going to come over to you to give yourself a quick introduction, and then I've got some questions for you as well.
Thanks, Nikki. Morning, everybody. Hope you're all well. So as Nikki said, my name's Martin. I lead the facilitation and delivery team for NatWest Group. I've done a variety of roles over the last sort of 25 years, but I've only been in NatWest for a couple. Interestingly, Nikki's poll question about, how do I feel doing stuff virtually? I've spent the last 25 years doing this stuff face to face, and I'll be honest with you, I was pretty daunted to begin with doing it all virtually. But You know, Nikki said about practice, I've got a phrase, practice makes permanent. The more you do, the better you get. The other thing that I'll just add is a little bit of an extra. I fell into banking. I never thought banking was going to be the world for me. Actually, before I got my first job with not NatWest, but another one of the big banking groups, before I did that, I used to be a professional dancer in the commercial world. So I've gone from looking like this, if you can see that, to looking like this. I have to admit that it was 25 to 30 years ago, but if I can do it, anybody can do it. So there you go. There's a whistle-stop tour of me.
Great, thanks, Martin. And that was a great photo. Absolutely wonderful. Was it blue hair I saw there? Silver hair?
Yeah, silver blue. It used to be bleach blonde. So
Lovely.
They used to colour it lots of different colours depending on what video I was in, or give me a wig to wear. So I've worn a few Afro wigs in my time.
I mean, that is one way to make an impact virtually, if you came on with bright coloured hair as well.
Yeah,
so.
I might not say that for your interview, but it's a way of definitely making an impact.
Not what we're advising. Don't go and sort of wildly dye your hair pink or anything like that. Thank you, Martin, for introducing yourself. As I said, I do have a few questions for you, because it would be great to hear some more on your sort of experience and advice. So my first question for you is, how do you ensure that you make an impact on these virtual platforms that we all use, like Zoom or anything that uses video, really, when you're delivering sessions, which I know that you do a lot as part of your job?
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess you've already kind of mentioned a couple of them. That practice thing is massive, because practice creates new habits. So, you know what I mean? I remember when I first started doing it, I was really nervous, but it's one of those things that the more you do, the easier it becomes. So just keep practicing. Another thing that you've already mentioned, and it's a massive one, that's almost my top tip, is smile. A friend of mine has a great phrase with this stuff: fake it until it becomes real. So you might not feel like smiling, you might feel like your left leg is going up and down, but if you smile, that'll make your interviewer think you're comfortable, even if you're not, and that will automatically give them a little bit more confidence in you. And look at the camera. That again, I mean, I'm on an iPad at the moment, and I can see a couple of people at the bottom, but actually need to look into the camera and imagine that you're just speaking to one person, just like you might be speaking to one of your friends, although making sure that your language is appropriate. But imagine you're having a conversation. Sometimes I stick a little picture of somebody that I might be having that conversation with. So just try and make it as personal as possible. And you can't forget that you're doing it virtually, but just imagine that there's a face behind that screen.
Fantastic. Thank you, Martin. Some great tips there. And you did mention when you first started doing more of the sort of virtual presenting, you did get quite nervous and you get more used to it. But what do you do to calm the nerves, if, you know, before a session or something like that, that might be able to help some of the students on the call today before an interview? Have you got any tips or tricks on what you do to actually calm the nerves? Yeah,
actually, I'm going to go back to my dance days. There's a dance days trick that I absolutely, and I still use. And when I'm working with new facilitators or facilitators working on a new program, I get them to do exactly the same thing. And there's two things. So first of all, is something called visualization. So I'll visualize it going really well. It's a psychological trick for the brain. So actually the brain, if I visualize it going really well and the interviewer's loving me and smiling back and thinking that I'm asking brilliant questions, I'm almost training my brain that that's what's going to happen. And I'm not going to talk to you about brain chemistry or anything like that, but if I can convince my brain that that's what's going to happen, I'm more likely to make that happen. I know that sounds a little bit weird, but I promise you, I'm still using it. Linford Christie, being interviewed a few years ago, used to say that when he used to be on the starting line, he'd already won the race because he'd already won the race 10 times in his head. And actually, his body just made him do what his mind had already told him to do. So that's really powerful. Another one is a practical tip, which again might sound a little bit odd, but it's breathing. And I know you're all going, yeah, no, Martin, talk rubbish. I know how to breathe, but we don't. Especially when we're nervous, we breathe from this part of our body rather than where we should be breathing, which is our hara, which is the center of our body. And how you can do that quick tip for you, quick little practical thing, and I still do this sometimes, is get 2 fingers, put them beneath your belly button. Go on, all have a go while we're doing it. Just have a go while we're doing it. Put it beneath your belly button, and then I want you to draw the breath up through your body, up through your nose, and exhale really gently through your mouth. So breathe up through your nose and let go through your mouth, and practice that for about a minute. And actually what happens is it slows your heart rate down, and actually it takes more oxygen into your brain. And actually that's a yoga tip that a friend gave me years ago when I was dancing, and I used to do that just to get myself in the right state. So visualize, breathe, and fake it until it becomes real.
Great, thanks, Martin. I think a good mix there of some practical things that people can do before an interview. But I love that visualization thing. So picture yourself getting that offer, I think, is a great way to do before you go an interview. Just picture that day where you might get the call up from our team, say, you know, congratulations, you've been made an interview, an internship offer, a grad offer, and then that should give you that confidence in the interviews. I've not heard that one before. I think that's really great and a great tip.
That self-talk is incredibly powerful. Incredibly powerful. So I sometimes go, if I'm a difficult, do you feel the breath in there? So if I'm in a difficult situation, sometimes I will literally say in my head, I'm strong and I'm powerful. I'm strong and I'm powerful. I'm really good. I'm really good. And I'll keep saying it just 10 times just to get me in the right state. And then I can smile and be ready to go. And sometimes it is a bit of a performance, even though you're just being yourself. And again, sorry, this is one other big thing. I heard this a few years ago and I love it. Don't try and be somebody else. Just be the best version of yourself, because everybody else is taken. You might see somebody do something differently and them getting really good success from it, but it's not you. Just be you. That's what we want. That's what you want to show your interviewer, the best you. That's what you need to do.
And I think that translates across our entire application process. Is just be you. Don't try and be someone you think we want to see. Be you. We want your authentic self. We want you to come in and belong and be who you are. So I think that isn't just for the interview. I think that's across the whole process. Is just stay true to who you are, and I think that's going to come across as much more authentic in the process as well. Now, Martin, some of the stuff you said there might link to this, but obviously it's much more difficult when you can't meet your interviewer face to face. It's harder to build that connection. But have you got any tips on how to build the rapport or affinity across the camera?
Yeah, again, I talk to my guys about this a lot, and I love a little phrase, so apologies if I keep throwing little phrases at you, but actually it's much more powerful to be interested than interesting. So there's a brilliant way of building rapport as being interested. So think about the questions that you want to ask your interviewer. Be genuinely interested in what they have to say, and actually that in turn makes you more interesting. And it's a brilliant way to build rapport. So, you know, when you're coming on to interview and they're asking you, how are you, your answer, but say, so what's your day looking like? You know, how's the interview process going for you guys? Because again, that's a really good way. People naturally like to talk about themselves and feel comfortable. So actually what you could do is help your interviewer feel more comfortable, because actually even interviewing virtually, still quite new for us too. So actually you can play that around and just ask them, you know, not too deep dive personal questions, but how's your day going? You know, what's the interview process been like for you? How do you find doing it on virtually over doing it? And again, that's asking your interviewer to do a bit of thinking and talking about them, which gives you a little bit of time, but it's a brilliant way of showing that you're interested in the person and not just the process. Fantastic. And smile. Again, like Nikki said, smile. If you smile, you'll get that back.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thanks, Martin. And I think it's good to build that sort of, or break the ice at the beginning of an interview, so that it's not just nerve-wracking and tense from the very start and you go straight into a question. If you have that bit of a conversation, you'll relax. The interviewer is going to relax, and I think it does make for a much better interview. So fantastic. I think you've shared some amazing tips there, Martin, with everybody. Really valuable insight there. So thank you very much. Love to also hear from Iffy as well. So Iffy, we'd love to come to you to hear what your advice is. So Iffy did come through one of our graduate programs, so is going to have some really relevant experience to share today with you all as well. But if you want to start with a quick introduction to yourself, and then we'll go into some questions.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Nikki. Hi, everyone. As Nikki mentioned, my name is Iffy, and I joined RBS in 2017. I started on the technology graduate program. It's actually now called software engineering, I think. And yeah, I've always kind of been really interested in the business side of things. So in uni, I studied mechanical engineering undergrad, and for my master's, I did a master's in management. So I wanted to focus more on the management side of, working in engineering and working with technical people. So I like, being more on the business side, not really into the technical details. So what I found in the graduate program was I was absolutely able to, have that opportunity to do that. So I started off in cybersecurity, and then I worked across different placement, supporting mobile teams, working on kind of marketing and communications to drive customers to use our mobile apps, and to also drive colleagues to use our internal mobile apps as well. So it's really interesting experience for me on the graduate program. Since rolling off, I'm now a competitor insights manager for our retail banking business. Really, I only just started that in March, so been learning lots, been growing lots. Fun fact about me, I'm very entrepreneurial. So I've started lots of businesses, from like reviewing CVs for people to starting a jazz band and managing that. I don't play any music. I don't even know how I got into that. But my latest kind of venture is last year in lockdown, I launched a kind of skincare, natural self-care business with making handmade products. So just a little bit quick whistle stop about me. Thanks, Nikki.
Thanks, Iffy. And I feel like we could get a collaboration going on here with Martin's Dancing, your jazz band, kind of a real show here on our hands. We'll save that for another session. Great, Iffy. No, nice to hear a little bit more about you. And I think I'll ask you a few questions as well, just to pull out some of your advice and experience, because I know you've got loads. And as I said at the beginning, you were great on our intro video and a real natural in front of the camera. So it'd be great to hear from you. But given you joined our program a couple of years ago, your assessment centre wouldn't have been virtual as it is now. But since joining the bank, and I think especially in the last year or two, you will have been using a lot of digital platforms to communicate and collaborate with colleagues. So can you just tell us a little bit more about what you're using daily and how perhaps they've helped you in your role?
Yeah, of course. So day to day, we're a lot of the times on email. We use Zoom to interact with our colleagues. So I think what has worked really well since joining my new team especially is we've all built a culture of having our videos on. So I'll say 80 to 90% of the time we have our videos on, so we're able to see each other and kind of interact. I think a lot of the time body language communicates a lot how someone is feeling, and they might not be saying it verbally, but being able to see how they're reacting to something that's being presented then enables us to have those deeper conversations that really allows us to add value in ways we wouldn't have if we weren't able to communicate visually in that sort of way. So yeah, I say using Zoom and encouraging you to have your video on as much as possible. I appreciate sometimes, you're just not feeling the way you look, which is fine. I think that's understandable. But also what I would encourage is using instant messaging when you're trying to reach out to people. So I generally try to steer away from emails because I think they just take longer for people to come back on emails. So getting quicker responses on either Teams IM or like a Skype IM is definitely one way I get engage my stakeholders and get them to respond to me quicker. Also, one thing that you guys might not be used to as well is probably phone calls. So picking up the phone and calling someone. It sounds like an age-shit thing right now, but it's absolutely valuable when you're trying to get someone to respond to something quickly. If the person is busy, most especially, it's such a good way to be able to reach out to them and just quickly summarize what is you want them to look at, where they can find the email, and what your ask is. So I would say picking up the phone and speaking to people is a lot easier than exchanging emails. So that's another top tip I would encourage you guys to adopt.
Great, thanks, Iffy. And yeah, we would encourage with the camera thing even for you today to try that out by asking questions and coming on camera. So it's a good way to practice. And if you're in your pajamas, that's fine. We won't encourage you to do that. But yeah, I think that's a good tip, if it is to do come on camera where you can, because we are missing that sort of face-to-face interaction. And you mentioned there about sort of phone calling people and that being a way to reach out. But can you tell us a little bit more about sort of the power of having digital networks, especially in the current day and age, and how do you build this internally, especially when working from home? And if there's any tips for grads or students on growing their networks whilst they're at university as well, given they're not on campus.
Yeah. I think with building networks, what I found, especially since being in lockdown, is you really have to be intentional and clear about the relationships you want to build. When everyone's been, locked down in their houses, it's very easy to not be able to meet up with friends for drinks or colleagues for drinks as you would normally have done. So you really have to be intentional about who you want to continue to foster a relationship with, and actually make that time, scheduling some time in the diary. So with me, I've just moved teams, so I've got some old colleagues that I want to keep maintaining relationships with. I've just got time in my diary to reach out to them and engage with them, because it would not naturally happen where we would interact or run into each other face to face in the office. So actually just having that intention, putting time in your schedule time in to, set up a Zoom call to catch up with a colleague. I have a mentor as well, so we have a monthly catch up in the diary where we chat on Zoom. We always have our camera on face to face. And just, I think what another important tip with building and maintaining a digital network is not losing touch of that human connection. So I think Martin touched on this earlier, being able to have that conversation about, how was your holiday or how was your weekend, and spending 5-10 minutes before you go into that hour meeting, just discussing about, what you've individually been up to. I think that's so important with maintaining a good relationship, but you don't want it to feel like this person is only a work contact. You also want them to maybe feel like a friend, or feel like you can relate to them on more of a friendly level. So I think building in those personal touches when you're engaging with them before you dive straight into the work, just checking if they say they were going on holiday, make a note of it, and then your next meeting ask them how that holiday was. I think people really, really appreciate that, and you'd be surprised, like, oh, you remember that was ages ago, and they don't forget how you make them feel when you ask them those little questions. So I would say don't lose those human touches, and also be intentional and set time in your busy schedule to actually make and build those connections.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's something relevant as well for students. I know some of you will have jobs and be working whilst you study as well, but for those that aren't, I think it's still really a good point to book time into people's diaries. So if you want to learn more about a program or a business pathway, or just about somebody that you found really inspirational, maybe you went to a session like this and you wanted to hear more, people are generally okay if you link them on LinkedIn, and even try and put in a coffee chat. Most people will be happy to have that conversation with you, even if it's just to get to know them a little bit better. It's a good way for you to practice in building those networks. So don't be shy to put time in people's diaries. Obviously reach out to them first on something like LinkedIn and see if they're willing to do that, and then try and set up a call or a Zoom meeting if you're comfortable to do that. And that's another really good way to get to know your networks. And if you've got one more question before we open it out to the audience to ask their questions, but you created a great video for us to introduce this entire Represent series, and I think one of the main things for me in watching that was that your personality and style really shone through in the video. So what advice would you give people filming a video interview response to try and do the same and not get too nervous? What are your tips in that space?
Thanks, Nikki, for the compliment. So I think when they actually asked us to record that video, they asked to do it live on Zoom and just hit record whilst we were in Zoom. But what I did was I went on my camera, my webcam on my laptop, and I recorded myself, trying to practice what I wanted to say. There was a lot of laughing because it's just kind of hilarious just to be, trying to come across as if, I'm just saying all of these things naturally. So you do have to practice. So turn on the webcam, record yourself, laugh at yourself, just ease yourself into it is definitely my top tip. Always, before I do video interviews, I always write my answers down, and then I go on my camera, record myself saying it and watch it back. And I'm like, oh God, why? So just being able to see yourself, do the things that you want to do live on camera beforehand, and being able to practice and correct some of the little things is a very important step. And that was one thing I was able to do on that video, to just be able to come across as natural as possible. There was a lot of laughing behind the scenes and just, you know, me cracking up on my own self. So do that as well.
Great, thanks, Stephen. You couldn't tell it was great. So thank you very much for sharing, and Martin for sharing as well. We'll have to go into the Q&A section now, just conscious of time, but we want to make sure we can answer all the questions that do come through. So I know we have had a few come through in our Q&A chat box, but is anybody brave enough to raise their hand, and we'll bring you into the main room to ask your question live? Anybody want to take that leap? We're not scary, we promise. We'll be friendly. No one just yet? That's fine. We'll go to the Q&A. Oh, we do have one. Mohammed, excellent. Got your raised hand there. So Gareth will bring you in and we'll get you to ask your question live.
So Mohammed's just going to come in now, Nikki.
Lovely.
Just take a couple of seconds because Mohammed has to accept an invitation to come through, but Mohammed is just coming through now.
I can see him coming in.
There we go.
Hi, Mohammed, have we got you there?
Hello, how are you?
Welcome, hello, welcome to the main room. It's lovely to see you, and thank you for coming to ask your question.
That's okay.
But yeah, feel free to ask away. How can we help?
I was wondering what got you interested in working at NatWest, and also for IFE, I was wondering what skills did you apply for electrical engineering to going into NatWest?
If you do want to answer, you can probably cover both of those.
Yeah, so in terms of what got me interested in applying for NatWest, actually my sister got a job up here in Scotland. I was living down in England before, so it's kind of like family connections. My sister also works at the bank, and she recommended it to me. She'd just been through the assessment centre and everything. She's like, yeah, definitely do it. So yeah, it was word of mouth. I was encouraged by people who had experienced applying for NatWest, and they thought it was a really good process, and I went through it. I actually was on a different grad scheme, and I came onto this grad scheme, and I can tell you that this program is really, really, really good. I'm not just saying that because I work here, because I've actually experienced a different one before. Yeah. The training support that they give you, the ability to, flex what you want to do and identify and learn what you want to do whilst you're on the job is great, and you get support from managers to do that. And in terms of your second question on electrical engineering and the skills I'm applying, so I think I actually studied mechanical engineering, but I think it's probably similar. We did a lot of coursework in uni, so working with Excel, working with Word documents, and being able to present reports, being able to think analytically from a problem statement, work through the analysis of how you would go about it, and then presenting a solution. That's absolutely what we do here on a day-to-day basis, or what I do anyway. Yeah. You're presented with a customer problem, you kind of need to explore different information sources and see how you can apply that to come up with a good strategy or plan of action. So I think you can be able to leverage your analytical skills a lot if you think through just thinking logically. It's definitely a transferable skill that I've been able to use in all of my teams and placements on NatWest.
Yeah, I asked that because I do material science and engineering at UOM. And so I was wondering, those skills obviously would apply when I applied for NatWest also. So that's what, so thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Mohammed, and thanks for being brave and coming and asking that with us. So thank you very much. Have we got anybody else that wants to raise their hand and ask their question? You can see it wasn't as scary as you might think. We've got a couple in the chat box as well, so we might go to those whilst we wait to see if anybody wants to raise their hand. There is a question around, if you fail an application for one program, will you be considered for another? So the answer to this is you won't. So you can only apply for one program each year. So if you do fail for one program, you won't be able to apply for another. And I think a top tip here is just to make sure you take some time to actually think about the program you're applying for, because you can only make one application. So don't kind of think, oh, I can apply for 5, because once you make that first one, you won't be able to make another application. So take that time to do the research and really apply to the one that you're most passionate about. We don't hire based on what you studied or what your background is. It's more about your motivation and how you fit with some of our sort of capabilities. So, you know, you're open to apply to any of the programs, no matter what you studied. So do take the time and have a think before you apply there. Oh, we did have a raised hand, which has now disappeared.
Dan is
there we go. Zidane, hello, welcome. Would you like to ask your question?
Do you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, sure. So firstly, I'd just like to thank you all for sharing your insight and experiences. I found that really helpful. I'm also up here in Scotland studying postgrad at Strathclyde, and I was just wondering how much knowledge like any of the panelists could share on the sort of day-to-day work they had for the graduate roles they were applying for, and whether they kind of demonstrated that much in during their application or otherwise.
If it might be you again, given you're our grad here on the call.
Yeah, no, I'll take it. My first placement was actually cybersecurity, and they assigned me to this team before I joined. They said this was a team you're going to be joining. I called the HR rep. I was like, no, I can't do this. I was like, I know nothing about cyber or IT. She's like, it's fine, you know, you're on the graduate program, you're here to learn. So she talked me into it, and then on day one, I felt a little bit confident. And then when I joined the team, people obviously understood I was a graduate, and I feel like that was what really made me grow confidence, because everyone was like, okay, she's here to learn. What can we give her so that she can build her knowledge? So it was always around, the managers were really supportive. It was always about information sharing and trying to get me outside of my comfort zone. I'm not gonna lie, it took a few weeks to find my feet, but one thing that really helped is just being confident to tell people that I'm not an expert in cybersecurity. Yeah. And I actually just started my meetings by saying, you know, I'm sat in a room with security experts, and they're talking like technical details. So just being able to open up and say, hi everyone, I'm not technical, I'm not a techie here, but if you could explain, you know, in simple language, layman's language, and then people in the room would even be jumping in, and, you know, if someone says an acronym that they think you might not understand, someone was like, oh, that means this or that means that. So just being able to be confident to tell people that this is where you're at and you're here to learn, I think is very important. That you don't necessarily need to have all the skills. They don't expect you to have all the skills. You're there to learn on the job and grow and develop. So just being able to communicate that to people, and don't just sit in silence, not knowing what's happening, and then like 3 months later, you've not learned anything because you didn't ask any questions, you know? Sure.
Thanks. So how long do you think it took for yourself to kind of get comfortable within that role then, and sort of become familiar with everything?
Yeah, so I think the placement was about 8 months. I would say within the first 3 months, I was mostly doing learnings, but from the kind of 4th month to the 8th month of the placement, I think I was more than being able to lead conversations and drive conversations and facilitate. As much as I'm, you know, part of the conversation, I was just kind of the one who was asking the right questions, you know, challenging the people in the room to say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And then just making sure that, you know, we're being as robust as possible in whatever decision we're making. So I would say like the first 3 months is enough to kind of get you to a good, confident place where you can, you know, start to drive conversations and be confident as well.
Okay, sure. Thank you very much. Thanks.
No worries.
And thanks, Zidane, for asking your question. And Martin, we've got a question here that I thought you might be able to answer. So I know you mentioned you did work for a bank previously, but what is it about NatWest? What makes us unique and makes you want to stay here?
Oh, it's a great question. There's 2 things for me. One is culture. So it's about, I remember when I joined, and I'd actually previously run my own business for 7 years, and I never thought I'd come back into a large organization, and I did through a piece of work that I was doing. And it was just, you know, that feeling when you start working with somebody, you just feel comfortable. And I just felt comfortable. And I think, you know, it goes back to one of the things that I was able to be myself. And actually that was appreciated, and my difference was appreciated, my different background was appreciated. And it's a challenging place to work, but I that's great. But it's the amount of support and help. And I think Iffy said this when she was talking about the 2 different graduate schemes, you know, I think that's an indication of our culture and helping people to grow. And I really believe in what we're trying to do, both, you know, in terms of purpose, climate, environment, and business. And I think it's easy to say, but more difficult to do. But I really believe we're living our values, and that's massively motivational for me.
Great, thank you, Martin. And that sort of links, I think, into one of the questions in terms of how diverse is our workforce. And I think you said there, we do, you know, NatWest is very open to all types of people, and people from any backgrounds, any situations. It is a very diverse workforce. You know, we have targets based on gender, on ethnicity, social mobility, things like that. So we are very focused on it. We do have room to improve and to change, but I think the thing about NatWest Group is that we're very open to learning and understanding what it is that we need to do to make sure our workforce is as diverse as it can be. And we know that obviously the more diversity we bring into the workforce, the better we are in terms of serving our customers and understanding their needs and communities and things like that. So we have room to grow still, and I think we're not sort of afraid to say that, but we are putting the steps in place to make sure that we are getting there with our workforce, and making sure it's as diverse as it can be. And I think one of the things to note as well is we have internally a lot of employee-led networks as well. So this is how Iffy and I have actually connected. So Iffy is part of our Black Professionals Network, she's the comms lead on that. So we have a lot of networks internally that are working towards making sure we're supporting people from all sorts of backgrounds, and putting that work in to make sure we are diverse. So I think that's a great question, and thank you for asking that question, Diana, but hopefully that answers that a little bit for you. We are out of time, so that does bring us to the end of the session. So hopefully you've all found that really valuable, and you're feeling a lot more confident to make a fantastic digital impression when it comes to making your application. So our applications are now open. They opened on Monday, so please do look at our website and take some time to choose the program that's right for you if you do decide to apply. As I mentioned, you can only make the one application, so have a look and apply as soon as you can, because we don't have closing dates on our programs this year. They will just close when they're full. So you don't want to miss out on any of the programs that you really want to apply for. So make sure you do apply as soon as possible. But we'd encourage you to use sessions like today and the rest of the series. So we've got another 3 sessions coming up over the next couple of weeks to understand more about our bank and our culture before you do apply. And we also have a drop-in application workshop as well. So you'll get some practical support that you need. So if you decide to make an application, but you've got some questions, come to our drop-in session next week, and we'll have a whole host of people there ready to answer your questions. And if you haven't registered for the rest of the events, we'd encourage you to do that to make sure you get the most out of the series. So thank you everyone for joining, and thank you Iffy and Martin for sharing your advice there. Hopefully that's helped a lot of people, but we'll see you all on our next sessions. Thanks everybody.